I want to welcome Agile XRM to the podcast. I've known the people at Agile XRM for the past 12 years. I've seen how their business process management tool can add massive value to complex organizational processes in sectors such as finance and government. If you have complex processes or a need for dialogues on the Power Platform or Dynamics 365, take a look at how this BPM tool can add value. You can find them at agilexrm.com or check out the show notes for more details. Welcome to the MVP Show. My intention is that you listen to the stories of these MVP guests and are inspired to become an MVP and bring value to the world through your skills. If you have not checked it out already, I do a YouTube series called How to Become an MVP. The link is in the show notes. With that, let's get on with the show. Today's guest is from Hamburg, Germany. He's the CTO at K&K Customer Engagement. He was first awarded as MVP in 2022. Surprisingly, because I thought he would have got a lot earlier, being that I've seen him active in the community. He's working for over 10 years with Microsoft BizApps as a solution architect and developer. You can find links to his bio, LinkedIn, all those type of things in the show notes for this episode. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Good to have you on the show. Now, if I got this right, is it Matt like Matthew or Mats?
It's actually Mats, but I get asked it a lot. So, for example, in Germany, we also have Matthias. That's kind of like what people always assume here. It's just the abbreviation. I think it's actually a Scandinavian name. And I think there was a famous tennis player called Mats, and my dad was a big fan. So that's how I got the name there.
Right. And so Hamburg, Germany, that's where you live?
Yes.
It's a big port city, right?
It is. It's in the north of Germany. I was actually not born here, a few kilometers to the north still. But yeah, living here for quite some years. It's a great city.
I love it.
You come visit me here sometime.
I've been there. I've visited Hamburg in 2017, I think it was, that I came through before I moved to London. And spent a couple of days there around the city, tasting the great food, checking out the whole harbour. And I remember going down the waterway, and there's down the right-hand side of the harbour, and there's a statue of Popeye. Is that right? Down that part of town. Yeah. So, yeah, we definitely enjoyed our time there. So what do you get up to when you're not doing work? What do you do for entertainment? Tell us a bit about your family and a bit about life in Hamburg.
Oh, yeah. Well, so one part, I love living in the city. So I came from a smaller city and actually moved here saying, okay, I want to go to like a big city. I think Hamburg is the third biggest in Germany. So I just enjoy kind of like all the social or cultural things you can do in a city, like going out with friends. I love musicals, for example. Hamburg is a big musical city. And I think next to London, actually one of the biggest here in Europe we have. During Corona, a lot has changed for free time for me. So I was, for example, really, really happy again. I could go snowboarding this year again, the first time after a couple of years. So yeah, that's what I'm doing a lot. Next to like the default things, like I like binge watching series on Netflix. I read a lot, all kind of fantasy novels, that kind of stuff.
I first met you from memory, and we talked about this bit before the show, in London at a hackathon put on by those CRM guys back in the day. I think that was like 2018 type time frame, and how you stood out to me, apart from you being quite tall. The other thing that stood out is your team beat my team in that hackathon. So you came first place, I came second place.
Oh, yeah, we did. That was actually the first time I met the UK community. You were living back there in London at that time, right?
Yeah.
I remember I was so impressed with kind of like you guys there in London, guys and girls, because there were so many people there working there, and being at the hackathon, sharing, having a great time. Also, I remember you took me to a German pub afterwards. That was really kind of like the London experience I got, basically. That was actually quite impressive. That's something I haven't known. At least in Hamburg in Germany. back then the community wasn't at that level. And I guess London is special in that case. But it got me excited.
So what's changed? I'm interested to know like what the community is like in Hamburg, because around that time a couple of major things happened around that. I'm pretty sure either that year or the following year, or maybe just the year before. So the Scottish Summit kicked off for the first time, and I went to that. That became a big deal. Yeah, London had a good user group, but really it seemed to be in those 2 or 3 years everything just exploded. Right, the community took off. You know. The big events now happening in the UK, both in Scotland and down in Southampton recently, of course. And then what are you seeing happening more in Germany or even in Europe from a wider footprint perspective when it comes to things like the Power Platform?
Yeah, I think the Power Platform is a very deciding thing there. So I started at the Dynamics side, specifically back then at NAV. So I started in the financial on the financial side of things, basically. And then I think like 5 years back, I said, oh no, that back then Dynamics sales, that looks interesting. And then later on, there came the Power Platform. And that's also, I think, in Germany, one of the important parts for the community there, because through the Power Platform, suddenly it was not just the Dynamics community, but I got to meet a lot of people from the SharePoint side, for example. I saw yet, for example, Tomislav on. He's from Hanover, which is by train like 1.5 hours from here. And I met him at a Power Platform event here in Hamburg. And I think this only could happen because the Power Platform was there suddenly. It wasn't just like Dynamics people on the one hand, SharePoint people on the other. Each of them had conferences. And the Power Platform really changed that in order to, we had the same kind of events we could go to, or the same communities we could exchange in.
Mm-hmm. So what do you feel in your journey? Are you more now still working on the Dynamics side of the house, or do you find there's more pure play Power Platform in what you're doing day to day?
So when I made the change, basically with another colleague of mine, we co-founded the company K&K Customer Engagement. So it's part of the K&K group, which was back then focused on ERP, which is now Business Central. And we said, well, we see there's a market for Dynamics sales. So we started as I would say, classical Dynamics partner. And we had a good timing in that way that we started without any on-premise stuff. So we could focus just on the cloud, which has helped us a lot. But it wasn't Power Platform back then. So we built kind of ISV stuff. We were focused on the media publishing industry. So big publishing houses use our software. So we always have the Dynamics core where we kind of build stuff on top. But what we quickly discovered with the Power Platform, that it helped us expand our products to people where nobody would buy a Dynamics license for because it's quite expensive. So it's usually like the hardcore seller. They get the Dynamics sales license. And with the Power Platform licenses, we could kind of like bundle that in our products and also kind of like extend or expand the footprint or how many people were working with the software. And so nowadays, I feel like we're shifting more and more, doing a lot more with Power Platform than we used to, because there are a lot of cases where it just works very good. For example, having these Canvas apps, embedding them in these model-driven apps, and being able to do use cases which you hadn't or couldn't do in just model-driven first-party apps. So it's still a lot of Dynamics for me, but Power Platform is gaining on that or gaining traction.
And are you generally always using the Dataverse, or are you using other data sources as well?
Yes, I'm a very committed fan of the Dataverse. So that's a lot of discussions or Twitter debates on that. But I like the Dataverse a lot. I think it increases your development speed by a huge amount. Obviously, it's a great database. There's a lot kind of like hands-off. You don't have to worry about backups, that kind of stuff. There is a license, obviously, attached to it. But I always say, like, I'm coming from the Dynamics side of things. So the Dataverse licenses always seemed like really, really cheap to us because we were used to the first-party licenses. And looking at that, we are like, oh, well, this is almost for free. Let's use that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's so true. Just back on the community. Tell me about the community in Germany. What are you seeing?
I think it got a lot of traction during the last years. As I said, when I was in 2018 in London, there was community going on, but it wasn't on the same level and it was more regional. Nowadays, there's a lot more going on with user groups popping up all around the corner. Actually, I'm quite happy. Like in 2 weeks, I will be speaking at the Hamburg user group, which a fellow MVP has got going here. Also, Cologne has a user group now, Hanover. So there's a lot. Munich is also a big part there. Also, there are more communities happening. And I feel like for Germany, it's maybe different than, for example, New Zealand or London, because a lot of people here like to have content also in German language, not just in English. So obviously we have people doing both, but you always, and I can understand that it's easier, especially if you get into a new topic, to discover or consume content in German. And that's also where I feel like some MVPs say, well, we decide we do content in German. But obviously, a lot of people don't know them because they are just known in Germany. They're pretty popular here. But outside of Germany, everyone's like, oh, yeah, I think I heard about them.
But the thing is that, I think it's important that you do, as much as possible in your native language. If you're Spanish speaking, you should do it in Spanish. If you're Portuguese, you should be in Portugal. I think that there's been too much of, and also kind of people worried about, my English is not good, so I can't contribute or can't engage. But I think people naturally pick up and learn better in their native tongue, right? So I think it's great that you're doing it in German, and it should be that. Yes, they might not have the global exposure yet, but, I think that's even changing. I think that, Microsoft is seeing, and I'm talking about the team that award MVPs, they're starting to see the nuances in the different geographies where people are having a massive local impact. And the whole idea of the MVP program was always about local impact. In its early days, is that you're an extension of Microsoft into markets that they might not have a big footprint in. So I think that's great. I think it's great. So do you guys run any kind of events in Germany around, Power or Dynamics?
Oh, yeah, there are quite some. Not the same scale as you mentioned, South Coast or Scottish Summit, I hope yet. But it's growing, but it's not on the same level. But I like to see how it's also Microsoft, for example, you mentioned that is more and more invested. We just had Ignite, and I think that's the second year that Microsoft has done these local or regional spots, right, where we had content in German. That was actually quite nice. I had a session there in German because otherwise, to be honest, so my blog is on English. I do most of my speaking in English, kind of like because I got to the community through the London connections mostly. So that's actually one of the points I'm trying to do more. And what I like about the other German MVPs, because they are much better connected here in Germany, which is great because that will increase our community here in Germany.
Yeah, so true. What are you most focused on at the moment? Like, what excites you about where Microsoft is going with the technology? What if we looked at the next 3 to 6 months, what do you think you'll invest your time in from a skills development perspective?
Actually, at the moment, it's Azure. So basically, kind of like I always like to have side projects. I'm really kind of like interested in 10 different things at a time. And at the moment, I'm doing a lot with Azure because I see that it's a cool, it's cool to kind of like coming from TechPoint, as you can tell, it's cool to dabble around with that. You have a lot more possibilities there. But it also integrates really nicely with Dataverse and kind of like extend where you hit limits, which is naturally for a low code, no code. And then but you can still extend it then with Azure. So that's something where I'm personally at the moment spending quite a few of time learning different stuff. So, for example, I mentioned my blog, which hasn't got a lot of love blog-wise lately. But what I'm doing at the moment is I'm looking, for example, at these Jamstack things, similar to Azure Portals. So you can kind of like build up with Azure static web apps, cool stuff, blocks them. And it's quite nice, kind of like as an also sounds a bit strange, but kind of like next to my day job where I do like Dynamics, Power Platform, really focus on. It's something else to do. And I like to do that at the moment. So I think that's probably the next half a year where a lot of my focus will be.
I like it. What excites you at the moment about what Microsoft's doing in the Power Platform space? What new features do you see coming that you are looking forward to?
I would say it's integration or the embedding of the different parts of the Power Platform into each other. Like 5 years back when Power Platform came, or also when the Dynamics brand was invented, it was basically a marketing label on top of different products Microsoft had, which made it quite hard kind of to explain to somebody why they wouldn't really work nicely well together. And that's changing a lot. I mentioned monolith map and canvas apps, also Power BI. That's something we also in our products use a lot, that we don't just say it's just a monolith map or it's just a canvas app, but it's them together. And then you embed a Power BI report on top of that. and have Power Automate everywhere. And I see that Microsoft's investing a lot of time into making that really smooth, and it's becoming more and more of a Power Platform where there are not barriers in between these products, but you really can pick and choose the right tool for whatever challenge you have. That makes it even more powerful, and also kind of like saying, as for example, more like a generalist, it's easy to get into these different parts. You don't need to be a specialist in Power BI to embed it in your Dynamics app if you just want to have a bit of reporting in there.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's a very good point, that whole integration story and using all the pieces. When you look at your day-to-day job, are you doing any consulting work, or you're more selling app solutions? Because you mentioned that you're in a niche there or a niche that you're targeted in on. Yeah.
No. So as the CTO, I'm mostly responsible for our product. So we have basically a core product we bring to different projects. But I work also a lot in these projects because on one hand, I like it a lot. And especially this connection, or when you go into exchange with your actual customers, what do they actually need? Not what you thought would be a cool feature and shows them really excited. They're like, well, I don't see the value in that. And getting in these discussions and see also in the day-to-day job what small things might be improved, which make their life a lot easier. So I do that a lot as well, because I like it a lot. It's fun. And I think it's also quite important. If you really want to do these products well, you need to understand how your users work and think. And you can only do that if you talk to them, not if you just look at them from the outside and think what they might think.
Yeah, so true. If people, and I don't, you've been an MVP for a couple of months now. What changed in becoming an MVP for you?
Well, I'd say at the beginning it was a bit kind of like shocked at how much information gets thrown at you. Kind of like there's a new Microsoft newsletter distribution list you get on. There's a new Slack group you get invited to. So it's quite a lot at the beginning to process. Also figure out, okay, what to do when. I don't know how many nights I'd spend trying to catch up with all the stuff there. At some point realizing, okay, that's not a sustainable way. You can like pick and choose what you can do there. So that was definitely something. What also excited me a lot was actually the community of MVPs. I think that's a big advantage of the whole program. Kind of you get to meet and to connect with a lot of these MVPs who have tremendously experience in that group and are all very friendly, very helpful. So that was kind of like what after this first shock of information, what you get to realize, and I like to spend time with them. So yeah, I went to Scottish Summit, to the South Coast, and that's also a nice thing there. You know more people just by kind of like being in this network and being connected there, which is really fun.
In closing, what advice would you have for other people that want to become MVPs?
I would say just start sharing. So whatever you do, whatever excites you, what you do, start sharing it, even if it's not kind of like the really cool new thing. A lot of stuff, if you figure out at some point, if it's just something, this flow, if I do it like this, it works a lot better. If you put that out, it will help a lot of people, even if it's for you something you figured out that's not really worth sharing. This is known to a lot of people. Usually it's not. There's a lot of people who will profit from that. And once you start also with these small things, getting involved with that, it kind of like picks up. If it makes fun to you, it has to be fun, because otherwise if it's just work, you can't sustain it, I think, for a long time. But if you start with these small things and discover, okay, this is really something which excites me, what I like to do, I think then it will pick up and kind of like gets you to new things. You will get in contact with user groups. For example, some people started asking me if I wanted to speak somewhere. That was kind of like a completely new experience. And I said, oh, no, we saw, for example, your blog there. Can you show that to us? And so I would say, stop. I don't know why I keep saying stop. Start. That's the important thing. Start sharing. Start sharing what you do. Talk about it. This working out loud thing, kind of like connect to your community. I think that's a great way of starting.
Hey, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Business Application MVP Mark Smith, otherwise known as the NZ365 Guy. If you like the show and want to be a supporter, check out buymeacoffee.com/NZ365 guide. Thanks again, and see you next time.